Good morning. Welcome into our live taping of Inside the Panel this week in comics news. My name is Magic Nate, and I'm here with my co-host Carl. Carl, good morning.
Good morning, Magic Nate. What's up? Carl Choi, publisher of 24/7 Comics. We're here to dive into the news of the week. Not much happening, to be honest. I feel like everyone I know is over at Emerald City Comic Con. I kind of had a pretty busy week this week, so I'm exhausted. How's your week?
It's been just keeping up with everything, especially as we are in the final week of our Bladesmith campaign. So that I know that you, the team, myself, we're all ready to go and super stoked about the campaign. And there's an amazing puzzle hunt going on this weekend, which I'm excited about. It's one of those days. Comic
Yeah.
Seeds, thank you for tuning in. Hey, hi, Comic Seeds.
Hey,
Arelis,
thanks.
hi.
Hey, Arella, good seeing you. As you guys know, there's the live taping, and yes, this week is the last week for Bladesmith. So, last call for anyone who hasn't backed it yet. Definitely check it out. If you haven't checked out our live stream from yesterday, we actually went over all the special card tiers. So that was a pretty big part of the news as well. But let's dive into it, Nate. Biggest news on the block is Emerald City Comic Con 2025. Have you been before?
I have never been to any sort of Comic Con. I'm still pretty new to the industry and to this whole world of comics and whatnot.
Yeah.
Uh, so why don't you tell me a little bit about Emerald City?
Sure, I always forget that you're a magic noob Nate, and so
Yes.
yeah, so Emerald City Comic Con, founded in Seattle. It was always kind of known as a very artist friendly convention, and I actually didn't go until maybe 2 years ago, and then I went again last year. And between from when I went the first year, then the second year, they had sold to a conglomerate called ReedPop, which owns a ton of other Comic Cons as well. And I saw a drastic change because as a comic art collector, there's some serious comic nerddom that follows that hobby. And so when they sold to Repop, I noticed half their artist alley were a lot less artists, or comic book artists, and way more like trinket sellers, kind of like a swap meet, as you say. Because a lot of times when you think about the artist alley, for me growing up, I think about the comic book artists, but I think it's evolved in a way where comic book conventions at the end of the day, they're there to make money. Like they need traffic, right? So who really brings the traffic are basically those that have social media profile. And often the artists that have social media profile may not necessarily be comic book artists. Often they're folks that does a lot of fan art consistently. They do a lot of like prints and like unlicensed print and whatnot and commissions, and that's kind of what you start seeing. And then over time those prints evolve to pins, evolve to stickers, evolve to different things that you would just sell based on like the characters you design. So it's definitely evolved a lot. Not quite my show anymore, but it feels like a few publishers are actually making their way out there.
That's cool. Do you think it's a do you think that Emerald City, other than being kind of like geek culture's um, mainstay up in especially up in the Seattle area, uh, do you think that's really kind of the future of where comics are going? Or
No, it's where the comics are now. I mean, if you think about it, like comic cons are huge. I mean, this one has 90,000 tickets, they said. And Emerald City typically is the one that kicks off all the conventions. So in a couple of weeks, we have WonderCon, which we have a panel there, by the way, on Sunday, I think the 22nd or something like that. And cons are basically where, if you look at a lot of these attendees, they're all wearing backpacks because when back in the day, people used to go to comic book shops every week to buy comics. Now they travel to Comic Cons to buy comics. So you'll notice a lot of vendors do a lot of business there. And so those comic shops that didn't really evolve may still be part of the old business. But for those who actually, look at the Comic Con as for what it is today, it's actually in a way replaced a lot of the volume that used to go to comic book shops because people has kind of eventized the whole shopping experience.
That's cool. I mean, you said it's not really your thing anymore, but do you think that in the future, 24/7, our wonderful shameless plug right there,
Nice
24/7
hat.
comics.
I know.
Yeah,
I
oh
feel
yeah,
like I need
thanks.
one of those. I want a white hat though. I don't look good in black hats, and so I've been asking Mary to see if she could find us a nice white hat because I would
A,
totally rock it.
a white hat would be cool. Uh, it would look clean.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
20% would work. Would make sense. I mean, look at our friends at Bad Idea. Got some coverage here. They're doing this capsule station. It's funny because actually Mary had the same idea. We actually tested out at Baltimore Comic Con, but I think that was like the totally wrong con. But in seeing Dinesh and his team, and they have a lot of experience, I feel like Emerald City is probably the exact right con for this kind of stuff. And so basically, what they're doing is they package three kind of exclusive comics in this gamification of purchasing books. So of the three, if you get one of them, then you pay $30, and there's 1 out of 3 chances to get like a super rare, right? And so I thought it was a great idea for this convention because, as I mentioned, it's a very trinket driven kind of like, uh, you know, uh, like less collectible, but more like, I don't know what else to call it, but more like trinkets, like artist toys and artist products. And so it's definitely like much better for that scenario. And Planet Death is awesome, probably one of the best comics I've seen in a long time from any publisher. The art and everything, and so yeah, definitely feel like a strong one.
it's
What else?
interesting. It's interesting that our friends at Bad Idea got featured actually on a couple of different different comic sites, comic news sites. Um, so it's shout out to you guys at Bad Idea for gamifying things. I think gamification is actually super important about when it comes to interactions and people at cons. I mean, you and I have talked a little bit about gamification. We did that actually at Comics Pro a couple weeks ago. Um, so uh, it'd be interesting to see in the future as we expand 24/7 comics and we make more and more appearances. How can we up our capabilities with basically gamifying the booth or allowing people to have a little more fun, just like Bad Idea did with the capsules, and things like that.
Yeah, well, the
Uh,
other thing I think that they're really smart about is their team. I mean, they're veterans, right? They used to run Valiant Comics, but one of the things that I thought was always really smart is we stand at the booths all day and wait for people to come to us, but the way they promote it is you come for 1 hour each day, and so for the most part they still get to do their business, do whatever else, but during that 1 hour, people are lining up and are heavily engaged. And so I think this is kind of also like the future of what boothing could look like, because you probably miss out on like maybe 20% of the business uh that's like walker buys, but where you make up is that intensity that people are lining up for and the footage of the hype. And so I think it's like a really good use of time and something that we should learn from as well.
Definitely. Relis, I see your question. Do you do any cons in Texas? Are there any big cons in Texas, Carl?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually have not been actually. I realize if you know any, let me know. We're happy to look into it. I think there is one big one, but I personally have never been, and I think a lot of it has to do with just the lack of like comic art, which is like a lot of times I travel in my personal time to be there, and so I personally need a reason to be there. And if there isn't comic art, I probably wouldn't go. There was recently a collector summit that was supposed to happen. I mean that was a news in itself. By I think it's by Heritage Auctions, which I think is based in Texas, and so it was supposed to happen. But if you were to look at, let me see, let me go back to the search page. Oops, my computer is crazy today, so excuse this really slow loading time on a modern day computer, which shouldn't happen anymore. But anyways, Collector Summit. I mean, we talk about one that I was about to attend. This was going to happen on the 22nd, 23rd, but it got canceled. I mean, it was cool because they were selling artwork and having big artists like Art Adams, Charles Vess, Carrie Andrews, Mateo Scalera. I mean, these are like notable names. But the tickets, I think, were a little pricey. I mean, like the gold ticket was $500, silver ticket was 250. So like minimally, you have to spend 250, and then on top of that, travel there. And I think in Texas, you kind of have to rent a car, and so it's a pretty like comparable spend by the time you get there. And so yes, if there was a convention that I personally would attend, it would have been this whole like collector summit, but it did get canceled.
Interesting. Uh, Arelis has given us a little list here of the Dallas Fan Expo, Dallas Comic Show 2 in Louisville. Um, so maybe there's a future there. Uh, I know we're mainly Southern California based, but uh, why not expand? As we grow, we may expand outward. It's never not an option.
Yeah, never say never. I mean, as I look at this one, Arelis, so Dallas in itself, it looks very anime heavy. I think there are some artists here and there, but it's interesting. I see why this is not on the radar for a lot of like, traditional comic uh, publishing companies or like crews. But yeah, it's definitely Adam Hughes is there. So yeah, it's definitely heavy on like manga, etc.
That's cool. So maybe we can get into the Dallas area or Texas. Or exclusive cargo right to get a table. It's free. That's awesome. I do. Before we get on to our next little piece, I do have another headline for you. A fight was started downtown today by a man wearing a suit completely made of mirrors. The police said the man apologized once he had time to sit down and reflect.
Sit down and reply.
Reflect, yeah,
Oh, reflect.
yeah. Like,
Nice.
thanks. Uh,
So yeah, so Arelis, back to kind of Texas. Um, yeah, I don't know. That was something to reflect on. Um, so fan expo is interesting because um, there's always been like a big kind of a question mark on the type of audience uh, that attends fan expos as a brand because there was recently maybe 2 years ago, a year ago, San Francisco had fan expo, and they had some of the biggest comic artists there, like ever. Literally like ones that you usually have to stand in line for like 30 minutes to an hour to like get their signatures or like art. What happened was the artist alley was completely empty. So you could literally walk up to like world famous creators and no one gave a crap about them. And so Fan Expo as a brand, I think has now been less about comics and it's more about cosplay and like celebrities. And so if you were to look here, like if you go through guests, all guests, and then celebrities actually goes first, animation voices, anime guests, gaming stars, comic creators are like second to last to cosplayers, right? And so it's really interesting where I think the priorities of what draws people to fan expos are mainly surrounding a lot of these TV celebrities. I mean, that's freaking awesome. Alicia Stone, Silverstone, Anthony Daniels. I mean, yeah, I get it. Like, how do you compete, right? Heather Graham, freaking awesome. I mean, so many like Dante's. He's on the tour circuit. So yeah, it's really hard to compete with kind of on-screen celebrities. And so I think what happens is, comic creators get overshadowed. And so yes, that's another reason why some of these conventions are probably less talked about in the comic book industry.
that's interesting. And I mean, is there ever like a opportunity for our? Are there any expos that you think that we would be great to kind of pop in and be a part of?
You mean the fan expos?
Yeah, or just in general,
Yeah, when we go San Diego Comic Con, New York Comic Con, those are the ones that make sense for us right now. just because there's a lot of noise there. The one I personally go to is Baltimore Comic Con and Comic Art Expo. But yeah, here are some creator guests that they have. And what's interesting, even like the way their marketing is, they don't even show their faces. They literally show their creation. So what that tells me is, Fan Expo is definitely a lot more of like a lighter touch, and is really more about like the commercial side of things, which makes sense. I mean, it's like the everyday people, they're not gonna recognize the face of like you know I don't know, Philip Kennedy Johnson, but they're gonna recognize Batman Robin, And I think that makes sense. Like no one knows what Ramsey looks like, but they recognize Detective Comics. And so I definitely feel like the way Fan Expo does their marketing is towards like a broader audience, which is
Got
cool.
it. And actually, that's a really smart way to kind of feature your guests is through their art. Uh, I could imagine just the lineup coming from 24/7, like who would be represented by their characters, especially after all the fantastic people who kind of come through, not just RIPs, but we get to work with, like Sean Chen or Kreese, getting to see their work out there. Oh, hey, Has Been Hotel. I recognize that one. Like the
Yeah,
top
see,
three.
exactly. You recognize these, right? But do you know Amir Talai? Like what he looks like? Like I don't think anyone cares. And I think that's basically the thesis of these fan expos, because more about the fandom of like what you recognize. And like, yeah, like if you saw, let's just say it's Carl Choi under there. If you saw my face versus, Has Been Hotel, like you're really gonna not, connect. But when you see these, you're gonna be, oh shit, that's my favorite character, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Oh my god. And so I think there's something really hard to compete with here when it comes to comic creators. Now, will we ever belong in something like this? Yeah, I think so. I think if one of our comics turn into a TV show or feature film or something, then yeah, then it makes sense, because now we have actors or voiceover characters that would represent that. But until that day comes, like there's just no reason for us to be at a fan expo.
Which makes sense. Hey, you never know. Maybe in the future, Bladesmith comes to theaters or screens near you people watching.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, you get Kristen Kruk is awesome. She autographed $60, photo op $80. So it's not cheap, but I think it's worth it if that's you have a crush on her. So with that said, let's jump into more comic book news. Then let's dive deeper. So okay, I don't know what this is, but it looks like I had it open earlier. I guess Bleeding Cool needs to pay their bills, and so
Yeah.
weight loss ads, of course. So one of the big things we talked about this week was comic store owners are being impacted heavily on taxes and tariffs. I mean, it's not just the owners, but the whole industry. It's really interesting because what something you may not know, Nate, is comic books are for the most part printed in Canada and China, and so some of the larger print runs they would outsource to China, and then otherwise they go to Canada because the U.S. dollar is much stronger. But with the tariffs, you know, all of a sudden, you're getting taxed like 25% on top, and then back and forth. But then what's really tough is with comics, the margins are already really slim. And so not only do you have a slim margin, but you also lose that margin. I mean, basically, with the tariffs, comic book publishers are gonna pretty much be working for free. And any margin that's already slim enough to pass to comic book shops will be gone. And so, without having to read all this, I think basically it's just making it impossible business right now. But to me, like, I always think it's a good thing. I think there's plenty of printers in America. I think hopefully, it opens up shop for folks who could make it work. And if they can make it work, all of a sudden they have a bunch of new comic book printers, comic book publishers as their clients, and then vice versa, right? Like there's going to be more work given to American printers in general. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first, I want to make it clear that to our audience that uh, with all the comic news and all the things that are happening, and regardless of our personal opinions or beliefs, we are going to stay kind of politically neutral,
Yeah.
and we're not going to take or represent one side over the other. So you guys at home are just going to get middle of the road, and you have to deal with that. Because a lot that's happening in this article seems to talk a little bit more about one side over the other, and I'm not going to point out which
Sure.
side. Uh, but just as information in general, it was kind of interesting to read through. I agree that I can see where this could make things very difficult for a lot of people, especially as smaller companies try to get their stuff to print. But I think you have a really good point as well that this kind of forces people to start looking at um, the print shops that are here in the US alone, especially how much, I mean, really this is an opportunity for them to get more business and get bigger and bigger as time goes on. Uh, Especially with the loss of like Diamond and uh, other people I'm trying to figure out what the best way to formulate this in my head is. This is a great growing point for the industry, especially with so many changes going on. Loss of main distribution uh, through Diamond. You have the tariffs going on, which makes it harder and more expensive to print your comics out of country. It feels like a lose situation, but to your point, I love the idea that we can start investing in other smaller businesses around this area. Um, do do you know of any popular print companies that are looking at this right now and going, "Hey, this is uh, a great opportunity," or am I just that out of touch that I don't know any um, actual companies that print out here?
I mean, honestly, the printing means they don't do a good job marketing. Like they're very targeted, right? But we are actually talking to a few, and we actually did our last print run of these Bladesmith ash cans on that we gave up at Comic Art Fan Expo, Comic Art Expo. We uh we actually gave out 100 copies of these. We printed these in America, and they're nice, man. They're high quality. I mean, not the most cost effective, but I think we're gonna be able to work with, you know, a local vendor to make it work. So that's kind of where our heads are at. But if you just go across, these comic book news outlets, I mean, it's not really just the comic book market, but like even the greater book market. I mean, they say this year, there's supposed to be 60 more Barnes and Nobles opening up. So I wonder how this actually impacts that business, right? Because this whole tariff thing was definitely unexpected. But you're right; these articles are like highly political. I just feel like, I get it. I think it's definitely like driven by political, but I wonder if writers can start like interviewing stores and really talking more about solutions, if that makes sense. I feel like
Hmm.
one of the things that you mentioned too in our chat was, man, there's so much like doom and gloom news, right? And I feel like in internet in general has been such a like doom and gloom world where I feel like people gravitate to doom and gloom, and that's why they keep feeding it. It's almost like as much as like we blame Google for like algorithm and how they feed us. We're our worst algorithms because we want to get more views, we want to get more things, and so people start going negative. And I think that in itself just causes us to not be able to find good news.
100%. And uh, this is our opportunity to change the narrative. And instead of just looking at um, the scary or the sad or whatever like that, we can look at fun, fantastic things. And so if we just reframe this story as, instead of, oh, this sucks, it's going to cost more to print out of country, why don't we just look at, hey, this is our opportunity, especially for smaller publishers, to be able to work with smaller print shops and build each other up in the industry. I mean, nothing's better than getting to really uh, help each other out grow, where now there's no longer a large monopoly, there's no longer a crazy like there's no there's no longer any barriers, and finally there's that freedom to go out there. uh,
Yeah, I
and
think cost barriers is the biggest thing. So audience, if you guys have any printing friends, let us know. We would love to talk to them. We are always looking for new solutions and folks that are more efficient. I know digital printing was supposed to be cheaper when it came out, but I don't know. I feel like the machines also cost prohibitive, so that's been a little tough. Yeah, I mean, so that's that. Speaking of comic book industry, I know we're gonna have a shorter show today. There just isn't that much to cover. I want to just highlight Adam Freeman and what he's doing. So Nate, I think you say you're a comic new, but if you're a podcaster, you like podcasts, I really highly recommend this one. So it's available in all the podcast channels and also on YouTube. You want to see their faces. But one of the really cool industry professional that I had a chance to meet was Adam Freeman, who runs this podcast called Comic Industry Insiders. And I've been really big on listening to it because I saw him at Comics Pro and he kind of just knows everybody. And then it looks like over the last year, there's Adam right here, he's been basically interviewing anyone, everyone of the industry. So some of the highlights that I really, really enjoyed was like, Jim Valentino, who was one of the co-founders of Image Comics. um, who else? I think like Ed was really good. Ed Greenberg here. He is the owner of Collectors Paradise, who we did a signing with, our very first signing with, and I had lots of learnings there. And then there's a few others that I thought was really good and like great educational from an inside perspective on comics. And so I highly recommend this podcast. Even just I go on runs every morning except today. But stuff like the nerd store, like I met him at Comics Pro as well. A lot of these guys have so much experience and so much and literally like inside track on what working in comics is like, that I'm kind of using this podcast as like my personal education tools, because we came late and it's great we kind of bring a fresh perspective, but at the end of the day history repeats itself, and so I like to learn about history of any industry that I get into. So Brian Hibbs is someone that is very popular comic experience. So he's next on my list, but as you can see, I'm currently listening to Dan DiDio, who was a former publisher over at DC Comics with Jim Lee. And so, yeah, there's a lot of great talent here. And if there was one big recommendation, I would love for everyone to check this out.
the comic industry insiders, I love that. And you said that this is like a lot of like it reveals a lot from the background of the comic book industry. Have there been any previous episodes that you want to highlight, or you can talk about, that probably made either a impact on you, or you think was a very interesting take in the industry?
Yeah, I think the Jim Valentino one right there on the top right. Um, less interesting take. I think more so was kind of cool to hear the behind the scenes of an industry I witnessed growing up, because he founded Image Comics in the 90s. That's when I was a fan, right? And I was a fan of Jim. And so hearing from kind of his perspective on what happened and then what's changed, I think it gives us a lot of perspective when building what we're building today. And so, yeah, I would say that's pretty much the highlight.
Then what we can do for our watchers, our viewers, uh, when this actually goes out on Monday, when this episode goes out on Monday, because this is just a live taping, not a live stream, really. We will we'll pop that link in the description down below so you guys can take a good gander at that and listen in. I know Jane actually was talking about how she has a friend that wants to know more about uh,
Yeah.
the dirty little secrets behind our industry. So this could be a good stepping stone to really get insight from different creators, publishers, and people who just work alongside it. Um, so we appreciate you sharing that. Uh, I do want to share with you also, Carl, another fantastic headline from this week. Uh, Archaeologists have uncovered a very recent discovery about Greek soldiers in war. Uh, Different studies have been done, and they've revealed that the soldiers seem to have abandoned their fires at night and snuck through the dark to attack Roman soldiers. Um, for a while, it was a mystery why they would go in the middle of the night versus just fight during the day, until a few other items were discovered and they found out that Dawn is just tough on Greece.
Oh my god. Well, with that said, we'll close up the episode with that latest headline. Anything else to add? I mean, this is a quick one, but I feel like everyone's at Emerald City Comic Con, so we'll keep it light this week, and then hopefully you guys catch us on our next live taping. So thanks for tuning in, audience, and we'll see you guys next week.
Sounds good. Take care, everybody.
Bye, guys.